Well, welcome back, class, and today we're going to take a look at some concepts that are very important for competition in the industries that are out there today. And one of those concepts that we're going to look at is competitive advantage. Now, what is a competitive advantage? We're going to talk about that, but it's how businesses can outcompete their rivals. We're also going to take a look at management. What is a manager? What functions are important for them to be able to perform for businesses to be successful? So today we're going to take a look at some of these other fundamental concepts as we move on in individual and organizational behavior. Well, welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at some fundamentals of management. We're going to take a look at what management is. We're also going to take a look at the history of management today. Now, organizational behavior and the management process. First of all, what is management? Well, there are essential functions that managers have to perform. There are essentially four of them. Four of them are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Now, we're going to go into a little more detail about these in the next slide, but those are the four essentials if you're going to be a manager that you have to be adept in. But also, there are resources used by managers. Human resources, these are the people. Financial resources, this is the capital, this is the revenue that keeps you going. Physical resources, such as the plant or property or technology or whatever you may need from a physical standpoint to help you in your responsibilities and duties as a manager. And information. Today we're in the information age, so information is vital, it's key. And the more information that you have, the better quality of information you have, the better off you're going to be. And we're evolving now, or we have evolved from an industrial age to an information age. So we have to really emphasize information today. Now, some of the critical managerial skills that you need to possess if you're going to be a manager in operations, HR, or whatever, but specifically HR. Well, managers have to have technical skills, and these are the skills necessary to accomplish specific tasks within the organization. Now, I will say this, the technical skills, as you move up in position, the less technical skills you're going to need. However, that doesn't mean you still will not have to be at least aware of or familiar with the technical aspects of the operation, whether it's a unit, whether it's a division, a department, or whatever. Technical skills are important, but as you climb up the ladder, as you take on more responsibility, there are other types of skills that you're going to have to incorporate and utilize, and that one is interpersonal. These skills are used to communicate with, understand, and motivate individuals and groups. So your people skills, and you've probably seen even today in want ads or classifieds where they say must have good communication skills, must be able to interact with people, must be able to handle conflict and so forth. So these skills are going to be necessary. The people skills are going to be necessary for you to be an effective manager. Also, we have conceptual skills. Now, what are conceptual skills? The ability to think in the abstract. That means thinking out of the box. One of the challenges that many organizations face is that they have a tendency to get in a rut and just keep doing the same things over and over and over again. When Steve Jobs was alive, there was innovation, there was creativity. I mean, this guy was thinking of everything. Why can't we take a computer with us? Why can't we personalize it? Why can't we make it more user-friendly and make it more attractive to young people and so forth? And then he came up with all of these Apple products. That is conceptual skills. That's exercising the ability to think out of the box, to think of new and creative ways to make products or services. Now, many argue today, since he's gone, that a lot of innovation and creativity has gone out the door. and that may be so. What I see today is really an improvement upon the same thing. But conceptual skills is the ability to be able to think in the abstract, to be able to step away from the status quo and to be creative and conceive and to be able to think in creative ways. Also, too, we need diagnostic skills. Diagnostic skills means that we can understand cause and effect relationships. If something happens, there must be a cause for it. So diagnostic skills allows us to go back and find that cause for that effect and so forth. It's not just a exercise in troubleshooting when something goes wrong. When things are going right, we want to make sure that we understand what did we do that went right. What are the things that we are doing that is causing us success and so forth. So being able to diagnose is a important aspect or element in the ability to manage. Now you see here in figure 1-2, all four of these, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. They're utilizing all of the resources that we've just gone over, and the end result is what we see as being effective and efficient attainment of organization goals. Now, let me stop here and let me emphasize something, because it is very, very important to grasp this. If you notice here, effective and efficient. Effective means you can do the job. Efficient means you can do the job at the lowest cost. Now you can get the job done, but if you're wasteful, if you're costing the company more than the problem or the solution is worth, you're not going to be in business very long, and you're not going to be a manager very long. So your goal is to, as a manager, be able to balance these two, effectiveness and efficiency. Well, now how do you do that within the confines of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling? Well, let's take a look at planning. What does planning involve? Well, planning involves the ability to be able to use those conceptual skills, to be able to cast a vision, to be able to understand what the objectives are in the organization, and be able to come up with strategies that will facilitate those ends, those objectives. Organizing is gathering together the resources that's needed for you to be able to meet those objectives. You may have to rely on financial resources. You're going to have to rely on human resources, physical resources, information resources. You're going to have to organize all of this stuff so that your goals and your plans can be realized. And then we have leading. Leading is where you incorporate those interpersonal skills to be able to communicate effectively to the people what it is that you want to do. And then controlling. Controlling is measuring the progress and the outcome of that project or that objective. And you want to be able to do it along the way. You want to make sure you're reaching your ends. As you are going towards your goals, you want to make sure if the company or if your goals are not in line with your human resources or your financial or physical or information resources, then you can adjust accordingly early. It's better to do it then than to wait till you get to the end to realize, hey, we failed. So planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. These are the four functions of management using human, financial, physical, information resources so that you can be an effective and efficient manager and help the organization attain its goals. Now, human resource management, HRM. Well, as a definition, HRM deals with the set of organizational activities directed at attracting, developing, and maintaining an effective workforce. Now, there are several questions that come to bear when it comes to organizational behavior and HR managers. First of all, which applicants should be hired? Now, HR is involved extensively in staffing. I teach a graduate course in staffing for another college. And one of the things that I teach them is that staffing involves the acquisition, the deployment, and the retention of people within an organization. That means you bring them in, you put them in the right place, and you keep them as best you can. So that, from a HR standpoint or from a staffing standpoint, is very important. Which applicant should be hired? Secondly, which rewards will be more motivating than others? And here you get to compensation. Compensation means that we are giving back to the employee things of value, just as they've given us things of value with their what we call knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes. So are we hiring the right people? And are we rewarding them? Are we compensating them fairly? The strategic concept of organizational behavior. What are you trying to achieve? Using your planning, organizing, leading, and controlling mandates, utilizing the financial, the physical, the HR, and the information resources at your advantage, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to achieve competitive advantage. And what's competitive advantage? It's an organization's edge over rivals in attracting customers and defending itself against competition. Now, when you go into strategic management, competitive advantage is going to be a big part of your coursework. Every company is striving to achieve a competitive advantage over its rivals. Now, in order to do that, you have to have something here that's really not taught a lot anymore, but I'm going to mention it here. You have to have core competencies. I'm not too good with this Apple Pencil, so just bear with me. Core competencies. Core competencies are things that you do well, and you do it well consistently. It could be your HR management. Core competencies could be your production. You may have a superior product, and your product is better than your competitors, and you consistently produce a better product than your competitors. It may be the same for services that you offer. It may be, again, HR or some of the administrative functions. Things that you do better than your rivals and you do it consistently better are core competencies. Now, when you do it better than your rivals and you do it consistently, that means you have a competitive advantage over your rivals. That means they can't touch you. So, gaining a competitive advantage over your rivals, well, that's what we're looking for in business. Now, how do we do that? Sources of competitive advantage. Innovation, being creative, being that person like Steve Jobs to come out with the newest thing. Because everybody else, if you're not ahead, is in behind. They're trailing. So you want to be out in front with the newest thing, the latest thing. Distribution, being able to get your product out in the right market, at the right time, at the right price. Speed. Speed is one thing. People today are impatient. They want what they want, and they want it right then. So speed of being able to get the product or whatever out to market is critical. Convenience. Most people today, because of technology, as we saw yesterday, most people today really don't want the hassle of going through problems getting what they want. They can go to any vendor because of the technology that we have with the internet and all of that. They can get what they want. First to market. First to market means that you are what's called a first mover. And that means that your product is out there before anybody else's. And usually it's because you're the one that's innovative and you've created something new. Now, there's a strategy for people to get their product out to market first, but there's also a strategy for people to hold back and see if the product is going to sell. And if it sells, if it's popular, then many people will go and re-engineer the product and sell it themselves at a lower price. And these people are called second movers. Now, second movers, instead of taking the risk that a first mover takes in creating it, designing it, advertising it, all of these things cost the company money, and they're already in the red before they even get the product out to market. And if it sells, they get the lion's share of the market because they're the first one out there. But second movers may hold back. They don't have to worry about the research and development expense. They don't have to worry about the marketing expense. All they have to do is just wait, and if it's successful, they can create the product themselves, change a few things so that they don't violate copyright laws, call it something different, put it out there on the market, and instead of selling it for $29.95 like the first mover has to do to recoup the investment that he or she has already made, they can sell it for $9.95 because they've not had to go through all of the steps and expenses that the first mover had to go through. So another competitive advantage is cost. Keeping your costs down. If you're efficient in your effectiveness, then you can produce at the lowest cost and you can undersell your competitor. This is how Walmart is so successful. They can buy Pepsi Cola. Let's say they can buy 10,000 units of Diet Pepsis, store them in the warehouse, and Pepsi would be jumping for joy because they can buy in bulk, they can buy in volume. But now Pepsi's not going to lose money. They're going to go to the mom and pop stores who might be able to put 10 units in their back closet in the family store that they own, but they're going to have to pay the regular cost. They're going to have to pay probably sometimes even more. And now if I'm buying 10,000 units at 50 cents a unit, and the mom and pops are buying 10 units at $5 a unit, guess who can sell at the lowest price? Walmart. And this is why when Walmart comes to town, the mom and pop stores go under. Service. If you've ever bought anything recently, you probably have surveys to fill out and emails to fill out and follow-up phone calls and letters. We appreciate you and we want to maintain our relationship and come in for anything or whatever. That's service. Service is a marketing strategy that has evolved from just the selling days where we just sold you a product and that was it. We no longer, because of globalization and technology, want to just sell you anything. We want a long-term relationship. We want you coming back. So service is another one. Quality. Quality, if people don't believe that they're getting the best quality for whatever they're buying, they have too many other options today to not go to those options. So we have to provide the best quality. And branding. Branding is having your name and your logo and your company etched in the minds of people. It's who you are. If you think of Apple computers, you see that Apple. If you think of Nike, you see the swoosh. You know FedEx, and you can tell sometimes just by the color of a billboard that that's a FedEx product, or Coca-Cola, or Campbell's soup. So that's branding. That's etching a image of that company in your mind and keeping it there. And that's a goal of most every organization. Now, some other strategies. Cost leadership. That's striving to be the lowest cost producer for a particular level of product quality. Again, Walmart. You're trying to outcompete and gain your competitive advantage through the lowest cost available for that product or service. Differentiation. That's developing a product or service that has unique characteristics valued by the customer. Now, Coca-Cola, they have differentiated. They're no longer selling Coke and Dr. Pepper. They've expanded their scope to include bottled water and all types of other drinks. So that would be an example of differentiation. And so is Pepsi Cola. They just are offering different types of things. Specialization, focusing on a narrow market segment or niche and pursuing either a differentiation or cost leadership strategy within that market. For instance, you have Porsche, Mercedes-Benz. They're not looking for people like me. They're looking for special customers, a niche market that they can focus on. And they've differentiated their product from people like Audi or maybe Mercedes or whatever some other luxury cars are. But specialization means that I'm not trying to get everybody. I'm catering to a special demographic or special population group, and that's all I'm caring about. And then I'm going to pursue either a differentiation or a cost leadership strategy in that field. Growth. That's where the company expands organically or through acquisitions. And back in the 70s, we had a state of business called conglomerations, where people were just buying up different companies from different industries. And the idea was that if we have a bad year in one company, we can have a good year in another one, and it would offset the other. So people started buying up companies in different industries to spread out the risk and so forth. And then people like banks or companies like banks or industries like the banking industry, they will accumulate and acquire smaller banks so that they can grow. And you see today mergers and acquisitions, that's a growth strategy. Now, cost leadership strategy emphasizes operational excellence. Here they're maximizing efficiency of the manufacturing or the product to minimize cost. Now also too, if you are managing a production unit, you want to be able to produce that product at the lowest price. It's not just low cost leadership in selling the product, it's being able to make that product too at the lowest price or that service. So this is where your efficiency and effectiveness will come into play again. Being able to produce results at the lowest cost so that you can undersell your competitor. Differentiation strategy looks at product innovation, and that's developing new products and services. Specialization is customer loyalty. Now, the history of organizational behavior. Really, we've just started studying it, but the history of organizational behavior goes back a long way. Now, the first formal study began around 1890, at the turn of the 20th century. And you've probably heard, if you haven't, you will, a man named Frederick Taylor. And he was, of course, considered to be the father of scientific management. Taylor was an engineer, and he looked at time motion studies. He wanted to discover how long it took to do certain things. Now, when Henry Ford began mass producing his trucks, his automobiles, he was trying to figure out the most effective and the most efficient way of being able to produce his automobiles. So he hired Taylor, and Taylor would go in and he would stand on the assembly line, and he would have a stopwatch, and he would time each worker in what they did. And then after they completed their task and the automobile went to the next person down the assembly line, he would evaluate ways of being able to make them quicker at their job so that he could move that assembly line quicker down the line. So these time motion studies started to really take off, and really the goal of it all was to maximize productivity. They weren't looking at the worker and how to encourage and really develop and build the worker. They were just figuring out ways of getting the worker to produce more. And some of the guiding principles was to replace rule of thumb work methods with methods based on scientific studying through these time motion studies. They were to select, train, and develop workers scientifically rather than leaving them to passively train themselves. Managers provided detailed instructions and supervision to workers to ensure that they are following the scientifically developed methods. Now, this is where we come up with the autocratic method of management. Autocratic method of management is the style of management where the manager tells the employee what to do, and the employee has no freedom of being able to do the job as he or she sees fit, maybe a better way or whatever. They have to follow the manager's rules to the letter. And today we still see some of that, where do as I say and period. I don't want your input. I don't want your contribution. You just do it the way that we tell you to do it, and that's it. And then dividing out work equally between workers and managers. Managers should apply scientific principles to planning the work, and the workers should actually perform the tasks. There was very little collaboration. It was pretty much a system of rules, and really the manager was boss. You didn't have any say-so as an employee on your own. The outcomes of scientific management. Well, productivity did increase. However, work was extremely monotonous and dehumanizing, and it was mostly abandoned after World War I. Now think about that. Most of this went away in the 20s. But yet there are still companies today that incorporate that style of management. There are some companies here in Memphis, production companies, that incorporate that same style of management. And it's a wonder they're still in business. But one of the things I want to show you here, and I want to talk about a little bit, is this one here. Work was monotonous and dehumanizing. Now here's the theory behind scientific management. And what Taylor believed was that if I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to become an expert in it. I'm going to, through scientific inquiry and trial and error and time motion studies, as I do this job more and more, I'm going to be an expert in it. I'm going to learn the quickest and most efficient and effective way of doing my job. And eventually I'm going to get to a point where I have reached peak performance. No one in that company or even rival companies can better me or do it better or quicker or whatever. And that's what they saw, but what they also realized was that if I'm doing the same thing over and over again, 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes 5, 6, even 7 days a week, it's going to drive me up the wall. And that's what we saw here, that they were extremely bored. And they were paying, Ford was paying, I think, $5 an hour back then. Folks, that's a lot of money. Back in the early 20th century. I mean, $5 an hour, we haven't, I don't think, passed that as minimum wage too long ago. But yet he couldn't keep people. They were leaving because they felt dehumanized. They didn't have a voice. They were just treated as really as just paid slaves, paid servants. So from that, we started to evolve in other types of studies that involved ultimately the people more than just the productivity. And that's where we come to where we're now, human relations movement. It was inspired by the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect was a outcome of a study done by Elton Mayo. It was done in the General Electric plant in Hawthorne, Pennsylvania. And what they first started to test was the illumination and how illumination in the GE plant affected productivity. Little by little, they started to lower the lights imperceptibly. I mean, so imperceptibly that this took place over a course of several years. You know, they just didn't walk in one day and the lights were dim. Just small, minute increments would be the level of light that was decreased day by day by day. But over time, they discovered that as it was getting darker, the people were working harder to overcome that obstacle. But there was something else. There were other things that they found as well. They pitted workers who were above board and workers who were substandard against each other. And the thought was that the producing workers would just walk all over the non-producing workers, but what they found was the opposite. Those who were producing more started to decrease their output so that their other co-workers wouldn't look so bad. And this is where they started to learn the effects of cohesion, the influence of cohesion in the workplace. And as you see here, some people improve some aspect of their performance or behavior simply because they know they're being assessed. So the idea that the boss is watching, this is where all of that came about. Now, later on, we viewed organizations as cooperative systems where people are working together. They found that through the collaboration of the two groups of workers in the Hawthorne effect. Treat a worker's orientations, values, and feelings as important parts of organizational dynamics and performance. That came out of the study because they realized that workers valued each other, their feelings, their orientations, and so forth. And it created a new era of more humane, employee-centered management and highlighted the importance of people to organization success. So the Hawthorne studies were very important, but it also hampered hampered by unsound research methods. Really it was through observations. And even though it was the basis and the fundamentals of where we're at today, there were flaws in it. But I'd be willing to argue with anyone that the Hawthorne studies were the studies that all of us today, we social researchers and business and organizational development psychologists and all of these social science researchers in the business world, really stand on the shoulders of Mayo and those like him who started these studies and started us thinking that workers are not a tool. They are people with feelings, and if we facilitate their needs, if we encourage them, if we invest in the people, they're going to be productive as a result. Well, class, today we looked at the 4 functions of management, and those functions are essential if you're going to be effective in any work environment. They're also essential if you're going to be an effective minister. No matter what environment you apply these functions in, they're all necessary. And it's not just a matter of applying them. You have to be the most efficient and effective in doing so. Also, to have a competitive advantage is how organizations survive today. So hopefully some more of these concepts are starting to give you some type of information or revelation in what is necessary for you to be an effective manager, and also how to improve the performance of your organization, whether it be a church or whether it be your business. Well, God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow.